Hi, I'm Sonya Wallace. I'm going to be talking to you about composting in this segment, and this is what we're all aiming for. A veggie garden that's absolutely bursting with life with beautiful organic food that we can put on our dinner table. But the secret to this kind of green success doesn't start here in the veggie garden, it actually starts in this bin behind me. And this is what we're going to be looking at in this segment. How to get these black compost bins working properly and producing loads of compost for your veggie patch. So let's get started composting. One of the most common plants you'll see in a permaculture garden is this plant, comfrey, and it makes a great additive to a compost as well. So if you grow it near your compost bin, you can just grab a handful of it when you need it, and we can add it in the compost as an activator as well. Another common plant you'll find in most permaculture gardens in the subtropics is the Queensland arrowroot, and this is a great additive to any compost as well. It collects the nutrients, and we can harvest the plant, chop it up and add it to our compost. A really good reason to compost is to keep this stuff out of landfill. About 50% of what goes in a green wheelie bin could actually be going in a compost bin, but instead it goes to landfill, and there it produces methane, which is really dangerous for the environment. So when you compost at home, you're helping the environment in a really big way. So let's get started composting. First of all, we gather all our materials, because one of the tips to successful composting is to build this in one hit. So you need a lot of materials to get started. So we'll just have a look at what we've got here today that we're going to build this compost with. First up, we've got a mix of dry manure and relatively fresh manure. So we've got a mixture there of carbon and nitrogen. We've got some mushroom compost as well, which is great to go through your compost system before it goes out in the garden. And spring and autumn are also great times to clean up the garden and get rid of all the plants that are starting to become bug magnets in the garden and put them in the compost instead. We also have some dry material. Here we've got bamboo. You can hear the crunching that it's really dry. And we have some goodies here from a vegetable store. So you can collect as many ingredients as you can. And it's really good if you can chop them up and get them as small as you can, and we can add them to the compost as well. We've also got some old straw here that we're going to add. And over here we've got some additives that we're going to put in, some activators that are really going to get it going. We'll add our comfrey leaves using products like kelp or old compost from another compost bin to activate the new one. Works really well, as does worm castings, liquid worm juice. All those things will help activate your compost and get it started so you get the right temperature happening for the microbes to convert all of this waste into this really yummy product at the end that goes out in the soil and grows your vegetables for you. So before we start composting, let's have a look at the type of bin we want to select and where to put it. This is a really good bin. It's black, so it's going to absorb more heat and help your compost get activated. There's also a lot of holes around all the walls, which will add to the aeration and the amount of air getting into the system. It's got 4 little trap doors around the base, so you can keep an eye on your compost and see when it's ready for harvest. It's got a lid as well, so you can control the amount of moisture going into your compost. And it's also got an open base, and what we've done here is we've chipped away the ground, taking the grass out, so we've got this sitting on bare levelled earth as well. Where's the best place to put your compost bin? Well, it's great to have it near the house, in zone 1 in a permaculture system, because if it's there, that's going to encourage you to take your kitchen scraps out regularly and put them in the bin, and you'll resist that urge to put them in the wheelie bin. So put it near the back door, have it somewhere that you can access water, because it does need to be maintained, and have it somewhere that you walk past it regularly so you can keep an eye on it and see when it needs to be topped up, and also when it's ready for harvest as well. Okay, so let's get started building this compost. It's a matter of layering, just like a recipe, just like a lasagna. We're layer upon layer upon layer. We're mixing nitrogen and carbon layers, and we're adding some activator in there as well to get it working. So we'll get started. The first thing we'll put in no particular order, is some dried manure. Now when you're working with making compost, you might like to wear a mask, because there are some things in here that probably don't belong in a human lung. But of course, if I've got a mask on, you won't be able to hear what I'm saying. So in your home situation, you might want to consider wearing a mask when you're working with these sort of materials. The next layer, we're going to add a bit of nitrogen. So what we've So what we've got here are some scraps from the back of a local veggie shop. These have been chopped up, so we've increased the surface area, making it easier for the microbes to start to decompose them for us. So we'll tip that in as our next layer. Now on top of that nitrogen, we'll add an activator just to get the microbes really excited about this. So we can tear up some of our comfrey that we harvested earlier and we can scatter that in there. Or we could add a handful of compost from an older system and add that in there as well. And that'll be full of microbes and that'll help to get this system started. Next we'll add a bit of carbon, and this is bamboo that's being raked up from under a clumping bamboo, so we'll add a layer of that. When you add these layers, make sure they're spread out around the compost bin. You don't want to end up with just a pile in the middle. You want to end up with a compost bin that's really, really full, but not too compacted. We're going to put a bit of water on that layer because it's a bit dry. So we're just going to wet it down as we make the compost. So have some water on hand when you are building a compost. The next layer we're going to add is some fresh manure. So this will really get the compost heated up and get it working for us. Now, this isn't dog food, it is actually horse manure that's picked up from the side of the road. You know, the bags you see out the front of people's places. So when you're out and about and you see something that looks like it would be really good in your compost, make sure you've got some spare change and a spot in the car to pick stuff up on the way home. Next up, a bit of carbon in there. And again, we'll wet that down, it's pretty dry. Next up, we're going to add some harvest from the garden, things that are definitely past their prime. They're starting to attract bugs into the garden and pest problems. So we're going to add them to the compost. Making sure that we break them up to increase the surface area to make it an easier job for the microbes to start to decompose them. With this nitrogen layer, we're going to add an activator, and we'll use a bit of kelp for this one. So it's simply a matter of putting about a capful in the watering can and then pouring that over that nitrogen layer. Adding an activator to your compost, particularly on the nitrogen layer, is one of the success tips for making a really great compost. So next up, another layer of carbon. This is dried horse manure, aged like a fine red. And we'll wet that down too. Now it's a good time to put the kitchen scraps in there. So everything from a tea bag to citrus, what else have we got? And onion. It's all fine in the compost, provided it's just the amount that comes out of your average family kitchen. Next up, we're putting mushroom compost in there. Now you can buy these off the side of the road often, and they're great in the compost. That's already got a lot of moisture in it, so there's no need to add water at this point. That's quite fine. Next, a little bit more carbon. Next, we'll add some of the weeds out of the garden, taking care not to put any seed heads or any part of the plant that's going to propagate. These can be torn up and added to the system. a little bit of activator on that to get it going. And another tip for really successful composting is to always finish with a carbon layer. And that'll save that problem when you lift the lid off your compost. There won't be all those little bugs flying around hitting in the face. So finish it off with some carbon. That'll keep the odour down and keep the bug problem down as well. This final layer of carbon's pretty dry, so we're just going to add some water to it. And that's it. Making a compost in one hit is one of the secrets to success with composting. This has now got the critical mass that it needs for the microbes to get going doing their work. So we're going to put the lid on this and just leave it for a few days now. Let it settle in. In a couple of days' time, this would have dropped quite significantly. And then we just go on a maintenance program where we keep topping it up, we add our kitchen scraps, we water it if it needs watering, and we add activator if it starts to slow down. And occasionally, in a couple of weeks' time, 3 or 4 weeks, however long it needs, you might come out here and top it up again completely to the top like we've done today and put the lid on it and let it reactivate again. So they do need to be maintained to get them working and to be able to get that really good quality compost product at the end. Great. Okay, so let's look at a compost that we prepared a few weeks ago. You can see things have been added in the top here. It's part of a community garden. People are using the bin, putting things from their garden here to make soil. What this compost probably needs is a bit of a water. So we'll just give it a bit of a drink to get started. And then to finish it off, if you've got problems when you put your kitchen scraps in here and you get all those flies coming out of your compost, it's really good to put a layer of carbon over the top. That'll stop that problem and stop that smell coming out of your compost as well. So we'll just give this a layer of carbon. And we'll just water that in. Now, this isn't the type of compost that you turn. Hopefully it's been built with a variety of different materials, some pretty chunky, some quite fine, and you've got good airflow happening here, plus all the holes around the bin as well. But if you think it does need a bit more air or water's not getting through, you can use a star picket to make some holes in the compost. Just push it in and give it a bit of a wiggle. That'll build tunnels through your compost that'll allow air and water to get down there and circulate to make sure it's fully working. Okay, this should be right to go again for a few more days or maybe even left a couple of weeks. So let's have a look at this compost and see how it's going. Look at that, that's not bad at all. Still needs a bit more breaking down happening. You can see the Slater beetle walking through that. That's a sign that the microbial life is there. And look at that, this is going to produce a whole load of beautiful compost ready for next year's veggie season. So a compost bin is really a great addition to your permaculture garden. It's a great way of recycling nutrients, it'll get rid of kitchen waste, it'll keep things out of landfill, and most importantly of all for the gardeners, it'll give you a wonderful, wonderful soil base to get started with your veggie growing.